He thought it would be just another test, a cruel game of control, pretending to sleep to catch his shy chef off guard. But when her trembling hand lingered near his face, whispering words she never dared speak aloud, he froze, and nothing in his world would ever be the same. Welcome to Becky Stories, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this beautiful story, hit subscribe and settle down to the splendors of this beautiful evening. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Tomorrow, I will share another captivating story. Let's begin. The city was alive beneath his penthouse windows. Rivers of headlights streaming through the night. Neon signs blinking promises they could never keep. Adrian Holt, billionaire, CEO, and the man headlines called the Ice King, stood alone in his glass palace. From up here, the world seemed small, obedient, like something he could close his hand around and command. And yet, despite every skyscraper, every deal, every empire he owned, Adrian carried an ache no fortune could touch. He was adored, envied, feared, but never known. People wanted his money, his power, his name. No one ever wanted the man beneath the armor. That was why he tested people. Employees, rivals, even friends. He set traps, built games, watched how they reacted when they thought no one was looking. It was cruel, perhaps, but it was the only way he trusted what was real. Downstairs, in the glow of the vast kitchen that smelled of roasted herbs and simmering stock, Elena Vargas stirred a pot with delicate precision. Cooking was her refuge. She wasn't bold, wasn't loud, wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads at parties. She was shy to the point of invisibility, the kind of person most people overlooked. But in the quiet of a kitchen, Elena came alive. Her hands moved with instinct, seasoning as though she could hear the food whispering what it needed. Still, she never spoke much. Not to the staff, not to Adrian. Her voice always felt too small, her presence too easy to dismiss. She had worked for Adrian Holt for 3 years, preparing his meals, never once imagining he even noticed her beyond the dishes she placed before him. But she noticed him. She noticed everything. The way he lingered a little longer at the window than someone satisfied with life should. The way he held his glass not with leisure, but restraint, as though even relaxation had to be controlled. And sometimes, late at night, she caught a glimpse of something raw in his expression before he buried it again beneath stone. Adrian had noticed Elena more than she thought. At first it was her silence, refreshing in a world full of sycophants. Then, her eyes, soft but hiding storms. There was something unclaimed about her, as if she lived her life pressed against the wall, waiting for permission to step into the light. Tonight, as he leaned against the frame of his bedroom door, he watched her clear the last tray she had brought up. She thought he had already retired, but he lingered. Something restless pushed inside him, the same curiosity that had driven 1,000 ruthless deals. A test. That's what he decided. A test to see who Elena Vargas really was. Elena carried the tray into the kitchen, her heart thrumming as it always did after stepping into his presence. She berated herself. Why should your pulse quicken for a man who doesn't even know your middle name? Yet it happened every time. He was impossible, unreachable, and so far out of her world that even imagining was foolish. Still, her foolish heart whispered louder when she was alone. Later, when she returned to tidy the dining space, Adrian was stretched across the couch, one arm over his forehead, eyes closed. He looked as though sleep had claimed him, but she hesitated. He never let his guard down like that. Something about the sight softened her. For a long moment, she stood there, tray in hand, unable to move. The city lights traced golden lines across his face. In his stillness, he looked not like a king, but like a man, tired, vulnerable, breakable. And against her better judgment, Her feet carried her closer. She placed the tray down carefully, each clink of glass sounding like thunder in the silence. Then she froze, fingers trembling at her side. Her throat ached with words she had never spoken, words she had swallowed for years. Her hand hovered above him. She dared not touch. Instead, in a whisper fragile enough that only the night might hear, she breathed, "Why do you look so sad when no one's watching?" The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She pulled back, shaking, retreating toward the kitchen. Adrian's pulse thundered beneath his carefully still body. He hadn't expected that. Not a theft, not mockery, not clumsy curiosity, but concern. Genuine, disarming concern. She had seen him. She had spoken to him, as though he were simply a man. His chest tightened, unfamiliar and unsettling. He almost sat up, almost caught her hand, before she vanished down the hallway. But he remained frozen, his mind spiraling. For the first time in years, Adrian Holt didn't feel in control. Have you ever caught a glimpse of someone's hidden side when they thought no one was watching? Did it change the way you saw them forever? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear. Adrian barely slept that night. His eyes stayed shut, his breathing steady, but inside his mind ran wild. The words Elena had whispered, small, hesitant, yet piercing, echoed again and again. "Why do you look so sad when no one's watching?" It wasn't just that she had dared to notice. It was how she had said it. Not as gossip, not as judgment, but as if she carried his sadness with her. As if she wished she could take some of it away. For a man who ruled boardrooms, toppled competitors, and reduced rivals with a single sentence, the revelation was unbearable. He was supposed to be untouchable. Yet here was the shy chef who barely spoke above a whisper, and she had seen through him in a moment he thought controlled. The next morning, Adrian descended into the kitchen earlier than usual. He never came down at this hour, but something compelled him. He found Elena already working, her hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up as she kneaded dough. Her hands moved with gentle precision, pressing, folding, shaping. For a moment, he simply watched. There was a grace to her rhythm, a quiet determination. She was so lost in her task, she didn't notice him until he cleared his throat. She jumped, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Good morning, Mr. Holt," she murmured, eyes darting everywhere but his. Adrian studied her. She looked the same, modest, withdrawn, unassuming. But he couldn't unhear what she had whispered. It changed everything. "You're up early," she said softly. "I could say the same," Adrian replied, voice lower than usual. "Don't you ever rest?" Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "The kitchen is quiet in the morning. I like quiet." It was such a simple answer, but it stirred something. He was surrounded daily by noise, phones ringing, investors demanding, assistants hovering. Quiet was a luxury even he couldn't buy. Elena felt the weight of his gaze. It was different today, sharper, heavier, as if he was searching her for answers she hadn't offered. Her stomach fluttered nervously. Did he know? Did he hear her whisper last night? She tried to focus on shaping the dough. Just work. Just stay invisible, Elena. But her hands trembled. Adrian leaned against the counter, closer than he usually stood. "You've been here 3 years, haven't you?" he asked. Her breath caught. He remembered. He noticed. "Yes," she managed. "And in all that time, you've barely said more than a handful of sentences to me." Her cheeks warmed. "You don't need me to say much. You just need me to cook." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "And what if I wanted more than your cooking?" The words struck her like a blow. She froze, heart thundering, unsure how to respond. He wasn't flirting. It didn't sound like that. It sounded searching, testing. Later that day, Adrian sat through a board meeting, numbers and charts flashing across the screen, but his mind kept drifting back to her. He saw her flour-dusted hands, heard her trembling whisper. He remembered how close she had come to touching him. Why would she care if I looked sad? The question gnawed at him. Most people cared only about his power, his approval, his signature on a check. Elena asked for none of that. She had nothing to gain. That made her dangerous. Because if she wasn't after his empire, then maybe, just maybe, she could reach something deeper. And that terrified him. That evening, Adrian deliberately returned to the dining room earlier than usual. Elena arrived with dinner, her movements careful, her eyes avoiding his. But when she set down the plate, his hand brushed hers. She flinched as though burned. "Stay," he said suddenly, before she could retreat. Her eyes widened. "Sir." "Sit. Eat with me." She hesitated, panic flashing across her face. I shouldn't." "Staff." "I don't care about staff," Adrian interrupted, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Just sit." Her heart raced. She didn't understand. This wasn't how their world worked. He was the untouchable CEO. She was the invisible chef. Sitting at the same table was unthinkable. And yet, some part of her wanted it more than anything. Slowly, timidly, she sat. They ate in silence at first. The clink of silverware, the muted hum of the city outside. Elena tried to keep her eyes on her plate, but she felt his gaze on her, heavy and constant. Finally, Adrian spoke. "Why do you cook?" She blinked, startled. "Why?" "Yes." He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "You could do anything. Why cook for someone like me?" Her voice wavered, but she answered honestly. "Because food makes people feel things. Even when they don't want to. Even when they pretend they don't need to. Food reaches people." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Adrian's chest tightened. She didn't know how close she had come to describing exactly what she'd done to him last night. Later, when she excused herself, Adrian remained at the table long after the plates had been cleared. Her words rang in his ears. Food makes people feel things. She was right. And now so did she. He had thought this would be a game, a test he controlled. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, Adrian Holt wasn't sure if he was the one doing the testing, or the one being tested. Do you believe small, unnoticed people often see the truths the powerful hide? Who in your life has surprised you by noticing what no one else did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Adrian's office was filled with the sharp scent of leather and ink, but for once he couldn't concentrate. A dozen contracts lay unsigned before him, yet his pen hovered idly. His assistant droned on about stock fluctuations and projections, but none of it landed. His mind kept returning to Elena. The whisper. The hand that almost touched him. The way she sat across the table last night, trembling yet honest. It unsettled him more than any hostile takeover ever could. "This is nothing," he told himself. "She's just a cook. A quiet girl with too much sentiment. She doesn't matter." But the words rang hollow. Elena, meanwhile, scrubbed the counters in the vast kitchen, as if she could scrub her own memory clean. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him at the table, watching her. She felt the heat in his gaze, the weight of his questions. She cursed herself for whispering to him that night, for letting slip words that should have stayed locked inside. Now she felt exposed, vulnerable. What if he thought she was ridiculous? What if he mocked her, or worse, dismissed her? She wanted to retreat deeper into her shell, to fade into the background again. But the memory wouldn't let her. "Why do you look so sad when no one's watching?" She had meant it. Every syllable. And now, she feared he knew it. 2 days passed. Adrian avoided the kitchen. Elena avoided the dining room. Meals were delivered by assistants. It was safer this way. But silence never erased tension. It only pressed it tighter. On the third evening, fate intervened. Adrian returned home late, drenched from a sudden storm. His suit clung to his frame, his hair damp. He pushed into the kitchen, seeking warmth. And there she was, alone, humming softly as she chopped herbs. She froze the moment she saw him. Knife midair, eyes wide. "You're early." "Storm ruined my schedule," Adrian muttered, shrugging out of his jacket. The room filled with silence again. Neither moved. The air was thick, charged. Finally, Elena broke it. "Your dinner is ready. I'll bring it up." No, his voice was sharper than intended. She flinched. He softened it. "I'll eat here." Her pulse quickened. He sat at the small kitchen table, something he had never done. She plated the meal nervously, every movement careful. When she set it before him, their eyes met briefly. His gaze was unreadable. He took a bite. Silence. Another bite. More silence. Then, "You whisper to me when you think I'm asleep." The words dropped like stones. Elena's breath caught. The knife slipped slightly against the cutting board. Her heart pounded in her ears. He had heard. Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean." "Why?" His tone was cool, but his eyes burned. "Why would you say something like that?" Tears threatened. She looked down, hands trembling. "Because it's true. Because you do look sad. And no one says it. No one dares. I shouldn't have said it either." Adrian leaned back, stunned. There was no calculation in her voice, no hidden agenda. Just raw honesty. He should have dismissed her, reminded her of her place. But he couldn't. Instead, the words that came out were softer than he intended. "You noticed." She glanced at him, startled. He wasn't mocking her. He sounded almost grateful, almost broken. That terrified her even more. She dropped her gaze, quickly clearing plates though he hadn't finished. "It won't happen again," she whispered. "You won't hear another word from me." And before he could stop her, she fled the kitchen. Adrian remained at the table, staring at the half-finished plate. For the first time in years, food had no taste. Resistance, it was what he was best at. Resisting weakness, resisting trust, resisting anything that might break the walls he had built. Yet that shy whisper had cracked them wide. He wanted to chase her, to demand she look at him again, speak to him again. But the fear that she might refuse, that was a fear he couldn't bear. So he stayed frozen, alone at the table. Elena locked herself in her small room above the servants' quarters, chest heaving. She pressed her palms to her face. What had she done? She had told herself she would remain invisible, safe. But now she was entangled in something too dangerous, too impossible. He was a billionaire. She was a nobody with flour on her hands. Their worlds could never align. And yet, a small, reckless part of her whispered that maybe, just maybe, he had needed someone to notice. That thought scared her most of all. For the rest of the week, their interactions were stiff, mechanical. She brought food silently. He barely looked up. Both pretended nothing had happened. But their silence carried more weight than words ever could. Neither could resist remembering. Neither could resist feeling. And both were terrified of what it might mean. Rain hammered the city again, flooding streets and snarling traffic. Adrian's driver called. The roads were impassable. Board meetings canceled. Dinner reservations abandoned. The empire could wait. For once, Adrian Holt was stuck at home. He prowled the penthouse restlessly, pacing halls that suddenly felt too cavernous, too silent. Silence used to comfort him. It meant control. But tonight it gnawed at him, reminding him of the words he hadn't answered, the gaze he hadn't dared hold. In the kitchen, Elena stacked jars and stirred soups, trying to drown her nerves in routine. The storm had cut power in parts of the building, leaving only backup lights humming faintly. The penthouse was dim, shadows pooling in corners. She had never felt so close to him, and yet so far. She nearly screamed when the door swung open and Adrian appeared, his frame filling the entrance. "Storm's not letting up," he said flatly, though his eyes flicked toward her. "Looks like we're both stranded." Her heart jumped. I suppose so." The air thickened. Neither moved. Adrian stepped further inside. "You'll stay here tonight. Safer than trying to get across the city." Her brows furrowed. "I usually go back to my flat when my shift is over." "Not tonight." His tone left no room for argument. "The roads are dangerous." Elena hesitated, then nodded. She wasn't used to being considered. Not by him. Not by anyone. Hours later, the storm still raged. Adrian entered the kitchen again, loosening his tie. The backup generator buzzed, casting flickering light. He found Elena sitting at the small table, arms wrapped around herself, staring out the rain-smeared window. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She startled. "No. The thunder's loud." "Me neither," he admitted. It was the first honest thing he'd said all day. An awkward silence stretched. Then, without thinking, Adrian pulled out the chair across from her and sat. For a man who owned half the skyline, the chair seemed almost too small for him. But he stayed. For a while, they simply listened to the storm. The steady rhythm of rain against glass. The low rumble of thunder. Elena finally spoke, her voice barely above the hum of the generator. "You must hate this." "Hate what?" "Being trapped. Not in control." Adrian's lips twitched. He almost smiled, but it faded quickly. "You're not wrong." She glanced at him, surprised by his honesty. "I thought so." His gaze sharpened. "You think you know me." Her breath caught. "No. I just notice things." He leaned forward slightly. "Like what?" Her fingers twisted in her lap. "Like how you stare out at the city as if it doesn't belong to you, even though it does. Or how you pretend to be asleep so no one sees the cracks." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Adrian froze. Heat rushed through his chest, a mix of anger and awe. No one dared talk to him like this. No one saw him like this. "You shouldn't say things like that," he said quietly, though his voice lacked bite. "I know," she whispered. "But it's true." The air between them thickened, charged. Adrian's hand twitched on the table as if reaching toward hers, but he stopped. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Then the lights flickered, and the backup generator sputtered. The kitchen plunged into near darkness, save for the faint glow of lightning. Elena gasped, clutching the edge of the table. Adrian stood immediately. "It's all right. Just a temporary drop." But her breathing quickened. Thunder cracked, shaking the windows. Her body trembled. "Are you afraid of storms?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, just nodded, trying to steady herself. Something inside him shifted. For years, he had been the one people feared, the one who never comforted, never soothed. But now, faced with her fear, he felt an instinct he hadn't felt in decades. Protectiveness. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out and covered her hand with his. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. But she didn't pull away. His thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles. "You're safe here." The words came out rough, unpracticed. But they were true. For a long moment, they stayed like that. The storm raged, but inside the kitchen, something else stirred. Something far more dangerous than thunder. Elena's heart hammered. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. She wanted to believe him. But fear clawed at her chest. Fear of storms. Fear of him. Fear of what this meant. She pulled her hand back suddenly, clutching it to herself. I should check the soup." Adrian's jaw tightened. Rejection burned sharper than he expected. But he said nothing. The rest of the night passed in silence. She worked, he lingered, both stealing glances when the other wasn't looking. By dawn, the storm eased. But what had broken inside them couldn't be undone. They were no longer strangers. The storm had forced them into proximity. And in the darkness, they had seen more than either dared admit. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered. The city sparkled under washed skies, sunlight bouncing off glass towers. Adrian's penthouse looked unchanged, but inside, something fragile had shifted. He found himself searching for her, without meaning to. At breakfast, he scanned the kitchen doorway, though she rarely appeared. During meetings, his mind drifted to her trembling hand in his. He told himself it was nothing, a distraction, an indulgence. But the thought of Elena Vargas clung to him like the storm's humidity. Elena, meanwhile, tried to bury herself in work. She chopped, stirred, baked, movements precise, mechanical. But her mind betrayed her. Every time thunder rolled in memory, she felt again the warmth of his hand over hers. Every time silence fell, she heard his rough voice whispering, "You're safe here." It wasn't true. Not really. Men like Adrian Holt didn't keep women like her safe. They devoured, used, forgot. She had learned that lesson long ago. And yet, when he looked at her, it felt different. Dangerous in a way that wasn't about harm, but about possibility. That evening, Adrian requested dinner in the smaller library, a room rarely used. Elena brought the tray herself, her pulse uneven. He was already there, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man, still powerful, still commanding, but somehow stripped of his armor. She placed the food before him quickly, ready to retreat. But his voice stopped her. "Sit." She hesitated. "Sir." "Adrian." Her head snapped up. He met her gaze steadily. "My name is Adrian. Use it." Her lips parted, uncertain. "Adrian," she whispered. Something inside him eased, though his chest tightened too. No one said his name like that. Not investors, not colleagues, not socialites. Her voice wrapped around it as if it meant something. "Sit," he repeated, softer now. Against her better judgment, she obeyed. For a while, silence reigned. He ate. She sat across from him, hands folded. Finally, he spoke. "You've worked here 3 years, and I know almost nothing about you." "That's intentional," she admitted. His brow arched. "Why?" "Because people don't really want to know," she said quietly. "They want what you give them. Food. Results. Smiles. They don't want the mess behind it." Adrian leaned back, studying her. There was a heaviness in her tone, one he recognized. "What kind of mess?" he pressed. She hesitated. The words clawed at her throat, begging to stay buried. But something in his gaze, steady, searching, pulled them free. "My mother raised me alone. Worked 3 jobs. We barely had food sometimes. When she got sick, I started cooking cheap meals, whatever scraps we had. It was the only thing that made her smile, even when she was in pain." After she passed, Elena's voice cracked. She blinked hard. Cooking was all I had left of her. So I kept going. Quietly. Safely. She swallowed hard, embarrassed. "That's the mess." Adrian was silent. The admission landed heavier than she expected. "My father left when I was 8, he said finally, surprising even himself. "I grew up in a house of silence. My mother remarried, and my stepfather believed weakness was a sin, grief, fear, even love. He taught me control, ruthlessness. If I showed anything else," Adrian's jaw tightened. "I paid for it." Elena's breath caught. She had never imagined he'd share something like that. "That's why you test people," she murmured. He met her eyes, startled. "You pretend to sleep. You set traps. You don't trust anyone to care without reason." Her voice softened. "You don't trust anyone to stay." Her words cut too close. Adrian's chest ached with the truth of it. The silence stretched, heavy with confessions neither had intended to speak. Finally, Adrian exhaled. And yet you stayed. You've been here 3 years. Why? Her gaze dropped to her hands. Because I didn't think you noticed me. The honesty of it pierced him. He wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand again, to tell her he noticed far more than she realized. But the words tangled in his throat. Vulnerability felt like walking on shards. Suddenly, the library door creaked open. His assistant, Julian, stepped in. His eyes flicked between Adrian and Elena at the table, curiosity flashing. Elena was just leaving, Adrian said quickly, his voice regaining its usual steel. The spell shattered. Elena rose, flustered, gathering plates with shaking hands. She didn't meet Adrian's eyes as she slipped out. Adrian sat alone, fists clenched. Why had he dismissed her? Why did fear always win at the last moment? Elena leaned against the hallway wall, heart racing. Shame washed over her. She had said too much, shown too much. What if he regretted listening? What if tomorrow he decided she no longer belonged here? For both of them, the past was no longer buried. It had clawed its way into the present, threatening everything fragile they had begun to build. The following days were uneasy, as though both were circling a secret too heavy to name. Elena moved quietly through the penthouse, avoiding his gaze. Adrian immersed himself in work, but his thoughts betrayed him, drifting back to her voice in the library, her trembling confession. Yet the bond was there now, undeniable. A thread invisible, but unbreakable, pulling them closer whether they wanted it or not. It was a Saturday evening when Adrian found himself wandering into the kitchen unannounced. He rarely entered without purpose, but tonight he felt restless. Elena was at the stove, humming under her breath, stirring a pot of sauce. Her hair was loose, framing her face. She looked softer, younger somehow. She startled when she noticed him. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." Adrian leaned casually against the counter. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," she said quickly, though her cheeks warmed. He nodded toward the pot. "What are you making?" "Tomato basil soup. My mother's recipe." Something inside him stirred. "The one you used to cook for her?" Her spoon paused mid-stir. She glanced at him, surprised he remembered. "Yes. May I try it?" The request shocked her. He had eaten thousands of dishes she'd prepared, but never like this. Not here, not at the stove, not with her. Hesitantly, she filled a small spoon and held it out. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as he took it. Their eyes locked for a fraction too long. He tasted the soup slowly, closing his eyes. Warmth spread through him, not just from the flavor, but from the intimacy of the moment. "It's incredible," he murmured. "Like it carries something more than taste." Elena's chest tightened. "It carries her," she whispered. Adrian studied her, struck by the vulnerability in her words. She wasn't performing, wasn't impressing. She was simply herself. And for the first time in years, he found that enough. "Teach me," he said suddenly. She blinked. "Teach you to cook?" "Yes." His lips twitched with a rare smirk. "Don't look so shocked." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You'd never survive in a kitchen. Try me." And so she did. She guided him through chopping onions, her hands hovering near his as he fumbled clumsily with the knife. His precision in boardrooms meant nothing here. He cursed under his breath when a piece flew off the board, and she couldn't help but laugh. Her laughter, it was light, melodic, and for the first time Adrian realized how starved he was for that sound. "Don't mock me," he grumbled, though his eyes warmed. "You're terrible," she teased, smiling wider now. He chuckled, surprising himself. It felt strange, rusty, but real. For a moment, the kitchen wasn't a workplace. It was simply two people, fumbling, laughing, sharing something simple and human. Later, they sat at the small table, sharing the soup they had made together. Elena sipped quietly, stealing glances at him. He seemed lighter, less like the man she had always known. "This is the first time I've cooked with someone," she admitted softly. Adrian arched a brow. "Really?" She nodded. "I always cooked for people. Not with them. It feels different." He looked at her thoughtfully, like belonging instead of serving. Her breath caught. He had named it exactly. The evening stretched, gentle and unexpected. They shared stories. His disastrous attempt at boarding school fencing, her childhood memory of baking bread too salty, but eating it anyway, because her mother smiled. The words flowed easier now, not heavy confessions, but fragments of light. Little windows into themselves. And for the first time in years, Adrian felt safe. Not because of power, not because of walls, but because someone sat across from him who wanted nothing but the moment itself. As the clock neared midnight, Elena rose to clear the bowls. Adrian stood too quickly. "Leave them. I'll have someone handle it." She blinked. "You?" Letting go of control. His smirk returned faintly. "Just this once." Her lips curved in a smile she didn't mean to show. Their eyes lingered, the air humming with something fragile but undeniable. Adrian's hand lifted slightly, as though to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. But he stopped, hesitated. Vulnerability was still too sharp. Elena stepped back, breaking the moment gently. "Good night, Adrian." He swallowed hard. "Good night, Elena." When she left the kitchen, Adrian remained, staring at the empty bowls. His chest ached, not with loneliness this time, but with something terrifyingly close to hope. Sometimes bonding doesn't come from grand gestures, but from small, ordinary moments, like sharing a meal or laughing in the kitchen. What's one ordinary moment that felt extraordinary to you? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear. The warmth of that night in the kitchen lingered like a glow Adrian couldn't shake. He caught himself remembering Elena's laugh, the softness in her eyes when she said his name. Adrian. It sounded different in her mouth, less title, more man. For once, he found himself looking forward to evenings, to meals, to the quiet presence of someone who asked for nothing. It was unfamiliar, unsettling, and addictive. But nothing fragile lasts unchallenged. It happened at a charity gala the following week. Adrian had no choice but to attend. His presence was expected. Flashing cameras, champagne flutes, meaningless conversations with people who wanted his money or his name. It was all routine. Until Elena appeared. She wasn't supposed to. She had been assigned to work in the kitchens that night, catering behind the scenes. But a last-minute staffing issue had pulled her into the main hall with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Adrian froze when he saw her. She wore a simple black uniform, hair neatly tied, tray balanced in trembling hands. Yet to him, she outshone every jeweled guest in the room. And then he noticed something else, how the men in the crowd looked at her. One particularly arrogant investor leaned too close, murmuring something that made her shrink back. Adrian's chest tightened, fury sparking. He crossed the room swiftly, intercepting the man with an icy glare. "She works for me." The investor smirked. "Relax, Holt. I was just making conversation." "Don't," Adrian snapped. The weight in his voice silenced the man immediately. But the damage was done. Guests had noticed. Whispers rippled through the hall. Why was Adrian Holt protecting a server? Why did he care? The narrative shifted quickly, and Adrian's carefully constructed image trembled. Later, in a quieter corridor, he cornered Elena. "You shouldn't have been out there," he said sharply. Her eyes widened. "I didn't choose it. They needed help. You don't understand." His voice was harsh, but underneath was fear. People were watching. They'll talk. They'll what? She demanded, surprising herself. They'll find out I cook your meals? That I exist. His jaw clenched. That you matter. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Both froze. Her breath caught. For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. But it vanished when his expression hardened again. You can't be seen with me like that, he said coldly. It's not safe. For either of us. The knife twisted. Elena stared at him, eyes burning. So I'm good enough to cook your food, to listen to your secrets, to make you laugh, but not good enough to be seen? Adrian flinched. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Adrian? Her voice shook. Because from where I stand, it feels like I'm a shadow you only want when no one else is looking. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was too ugly to admit. He was terrified. Terrified of scandal, of weakness, of what she made him feel. And so he did what he always did. He retreated behind the wall. Go back to the kitchen, he said flatly. The pain in her eyes gutted him. She set down the tray with trembling hands and walked away without another word. That night, Elena packed her small bag in her quarters. She couldn't stay. Not after he had reduced her to nothing in public. Not after he had confirmed her worst fear, that she was invisible unless hidden. Tears blurred her vision as she zipped the bag. For a brief moment, she had believed in something more. She had felt seen, felt safe. But she was a fool to think a billionaire could ever truly want someone like her. She left the bag by the door, ready to go at dawn. Adrian sat alone in his penthouse study, glass of scotch untouched. He replayed her words on a loop. Good enough in the shadows, not in the light. She was right. That was exactly what he had made her feel. But wasn't he right too? The world was merciless. It would tear her apart if it knew. She didn't belong in his world. He had told himself it was protection. But in truth, it was fear. Fear of choosing her openly and losing control. Fear of admitting she mattered more than everything else. For the first time in years, Adrian Holt hated himself. The next morning, Elena was gone before breakfast. Her quarters were empty, her apron folded neatly on the bed. Adrian found it hours later. He stared at the folded cloth, the quiet finality of it, and something inside him shattered. For all his wealth, all his power, all his control, he had nothing. He had pushed away the only person who had dared to see him. The city pulsed as always, horns blaring, skyscrapers glowing. But for Adrian Holt, everything had gone silent. Days passed since Elena left. The penthouse was immaculate, the meals still flawless, but it all felt wrong. Sterile. Empty. The hum of the kitchen no longer carried her voice. The halls no longer smelled faintly of herbs and warm bread. It wasn't just her absence. It was the void inside him she had once filled, quietly, gently, without him noticing until she was gone. He had told himself he was protecting her. But now, staring at the folded apron still left on her bed, he knew the truth. He had protected nothing. He had destroyed the one thing that made him feel alive. Elena, meanwhile, stood in the cramped apartment of a friend on the city's south side. She cooked to pay rent, cheap meals for neighbors, extra pastries for the corner cafe. But it wasn't the same. Her hands moved, but her heart wasn't in it. Every dish reminded her of him. Every empty night reminded her of the warmth she'd almost believed in. Fool, she told herself. She had sworn never to need anyone. Never to trust someone powerful enough to crush her. And yet she had let Adrian Holt in. And he had proven her right. Shadows. Secrets. Shame. But still, her heart betrayed her. Because when she closed her eyes, she remembered him in the kitchen, fumbling with onions, laughing with her, whispering she was safe. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, he regretted letting her go. Adrian sat in his office late one night, City lights spread beneath him like fireflies. His empire was thriving, but he felt like a beggar, hollow, starving. Julian entered quietly. "You've been here for hours. Go home." Adrian didn't look up. Home doesn't feel like home anymore. Julian hesitated, then dared. "Because she's not there?" Adrian's head snapped up, sharp retort ready. But the words died in his throat. His assistant's steady gaze held no judgment, only truth. "Find her," Julian said simply. Adrian swallowed. Fear clawed at him. He wasn't used to chasing anyone. He was used to commanding, to controlling. But Elena was different. She couldn't be commanded. She had to be chosen. And he had to risk being rejected. Meanwhile, Elena stood at the market, fingers brushing tomatoes she couldn't afford. A little girl beside her tugged her mother's sleeve, pointing at the bright fruit. The mother smiled tiredly. "Maybe next week." Elena's chest ached. She remembered her own mother saying those same words, holding her small hand. On impulse, she bought 2 extra and handed them to the mother. "For her," she said softly. The woman's eyes shone. "Bless you." Elena smiled faintly. It felt good to give, but it also reminded her of what she'd lost. The chance to give more than food. The chance to give her heart. That night, she sat at the window of the small apartment, staring at the city lights. Somewhere in that glittering skyline, Adrian Holt was probably drinking expensive scotch, forgetting her. Or maybe, just maybe, he wasn't. She hated herself for the hope. But she couldn't kill it. Adrian finally broke. He left his office, found her address from an old employment form, and drove himself. No driver, no entourage. His chest pounded as he pulled into the narrow street, so far from the luxury of his world. He knocked on the worn wooden door, hard in his throat. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Finally it opened. Elena stood there in simple clothes, hair loose, eyes wide with shock. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, voice rough, "I was wrong." Her throat tightened. "About what?" "Everything." His eyes burned. "About hiding you. About pushing you away. About believing I could protect myself from you." She folded her arms, a shield. "And now what? You say you're sorry, and it all disappears." "No," he stepped closer, desperate. "It doesn't disappear. It haunts me. You haunt me. Every room, without you, is empty. Every meal tastes like ash. I thought I was strong, Elena, but I was a coward. Too afraid to let the world see I need you." Her eyes filled with tears, but anger still flared. "And what happens when the world does see? When they whisper, when they judge? Do I go back to being your secret?" His voice cracked. "No. Never again. If you walk back into my life, you'll walk beside me, in the light. Not as my chef. Not as my secret. As the woman he faltered, the words choking him. But then, with all the force he had, he finished. As the woman I love. Elena gasped softly, hand trembling on the doorframe. She had dreamed of those words, but never believed them possible. Silence stretched, thick with everything between them. Fear, love, risk. Finally she whispered, "Love isn't enough if it's not brave." Adrian met her gaze steadily. "Then let me prove I'm brave enough for you." Her chest ached with longing, but doubt still lingered. She shook her head, stepping back. "I need time." He nodded, pain flickering in his eyes, but no anger. "I'll wait, however long it takes." And for the first time, Adrian Holt turned and walked away, not out of pride, but out of love. Elena closed the door, tears streaming down her face. Her heart warred with itself. Could she believe him? Could she risk everything again? The choice weighed heavy. But for the first time, she wasn't making it alone. Elena barely slept after Adrian's visit. His words echoed in her mind. "As the woman I love." She had wanted to believe him. His voice had carried a rawness she had never heard before. But scars ran deep, and doubt whispered louder than hope. Could a man like Adrian Holt really choose her, stand beside her, without shame? Morning came with no answers, only questions. She moved through her routine mechanically, chopping vegetables, simmering broth. But her hands shook. For the first time, cooking did not quiet her heart. Meanwhile, Adrian returned to his penthouse, a place that once symbolized power, now only emptiness. He had laid his heart bare, and she hadn't said yes. She hadn't said no either. But waiting was agony. For the next week, he kept his promise. No calls. No demands. No pressure. He let her breathe. He told himself love wasn't possession, it was patience. But patience tasted like despair. Julian watched him with concern. "You've changed," he said bluntly one evening. Adrian looked out at the skyline. "For the first time, I want something money can't buy. And it terrifies me." "Then fight for it," Julian urged. "Not with power, with truth." Elena's breaking point came one afternoon at the cafe where she'd been helping. A young couple sat at a corner table, laughing softly over shared cake. Their joy was simple, unguarded. Elena's chest ached watching them, because deep down she wanted that too. Not wealth, not perfection, just love that was brave enough to stand in the light. And she thought of Adrian, his clumsy knife work in the kitchen, his laugh when she teased him, his eyes when he admitted his past. He had shown her pieces of himself no one else had seen. Maybe that was his bravery. Maybe he really was trying. Her decision crystallized. That evening, she dressed in her simplest clothes and took the train uptown. Her heart pounded as she approached the gleaming tower that loomed above the city. Adrian's tower. The lobby guards looked surprised, but when she said her name, they let her pass. Her hands shook as she rode the elevator up, floor after floor, until the doors opened into the penthouse she had once called her prison, her refuge, her battlefield. Adrian was in the library, staring at the fire he hadn't lit. He heard the elevator chime and footsteps on marble. His chest tightened. When she appeared in the doorway, he rose too quickly, eyes wide. "Elena." She swallowed. "You said you'd wait. I would have waited forever." Her heart trembled at the sincerity in his voice. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. But forever's too long for answers. He braced himself, fear and hope colliding. "And your answer is?" She held his gaze, trembling but steady. "Yes." The word hit him like lightning. His walls crumbled. His mask shattered. He crossed the room in 3 strides, but stopped just short, afraid she might change her mind. Elena's breath shook. "But only if you mean it, Adrian. Only if I'm not your shadow. Only if you'll stand with me in the light." He reached for her hand, voice breaking. "No shadows. Not ever again." Her fingers curled into his, and the world righted itself. That night, there were no secrets left. They sat together by the fire, no scotch, no masks, just soup and bread she had brought with her. They laughed, they cried, they remembered. At one point, Adrian brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "You're home." She smiled, tears glistening. "So are you." Weeks later, their first public test came. Adrian brought Elena to a corporate charity dinner, not as staff, but as his guest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers followed. But Adrian didn't flinch. He stood tall, her hand in his gaze daring anyone to challenge it. Elena's heart hammered, but when she looked at him, she saw no hesitation. Only pride. Only love. And in that moment, she knew he had kept his promise. No more shadows. Months later, their kitchen became their favorite place. Not the boardroom, not the penthouse office, the kitchen. Adrian burned toast regularly. Elena teased him mercilessly. They cooked together, laughed together, healed together. The world might have seen a billionaire and his chef. But inside those walls, they were simply Adrian and Elena, two people who had chosen love in the light. One quiet evening, Adrian pretended to fall asleep on the couch, just like that first test. Elena noticed, smiled faintly, and leaned close. This time, instead of whispering her secret, she kissed his temple softly. "I love you," she whispered. His eyes opened. No pretense. No test. Only truth. "I love you too." And this time, nothing stood between them. Adrian and Elena's story reminds us that real love isn't found in shadows. It's built in the light. Do you believe love can truly change people for the better? Share your thoughts in the comments below.